Hello and welcome to DevSecOps Germany. We are a chapter of the global DevSecOps community, an inclusive community that educates and enables developers in application security. And my name is Matthias Konrad. I am the co-founder of an identity and security startup called Quasar. And I'm also the host of the DevSecOps Germany series. And coming up, I'll be joined by Christina, Paule, and Georgia König from Novatech Consulting. Hello.
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 And they'll be talking about what actually is DevSecOps. But before we get started, I want to say a few words on how you can best interact with our speakers. So if you go to devsecon.com, please join our Discord community. There will be a button up there. And also join us on Twitter. And this talk will be recorded. You can view it on YouTube. Please, if you have questions, leave the questions in the YouTube chat. But also afterwards, you can ask questions in our Discord community. Once the session is over, you can reshare the video with friends and colleagues. And yeah, feel free to ask questions, keep it interactive. DevSecOps is brought to you by Sneak. Our aim is basically to create a vendor-neutral space to share knowledge and best practices related to software security. And now, without further ado, Christina and Georgia, I will just hand over to you and maybe you introduce yourself very quickly.
Yeah, thank you very much for that introduction. Well, I have the honor now to show the title card. Well, today we are joining here to talk about DevSecOps, and we chose the title. So what is DevSecOps actually? Because that's a question we both get on a regular basis because we both work in IT and IT consulting. And just to introduce myself first, my name is Georgia, and I actually provided a slide talking about myself. I hope, yeah, now it shows up. So yeah, Georgia König's my name. At the moment, I'm working at Novatech, and I get the question about DevSecOps and DevOps quite regularly because I did my bachelor thesis on the topic, didactic transfer of DevOps-associated concepts via workshops. So actually, I did my bachelor about how can we teach DevOps and how can we use the knowledge in a workshop setting. And then I did my master thesis on systems of continuous improvement, also in a DevOps context. So the question I got there was, yeah, but how can we do DevOps like better? And because I get those questions a lot, I feel that I can talk about that. And today I'm joined in my DevOps expertise by my colleague, Christina, who will enhance my expertise with her expertise about the security aspect and the security domain. And so she should just talk about herself. So Christina, this is your slide.
Yeah, thank you. Hello also from my side. My name is Christina Paule. I'm also working at Novatech, and my main focuses are security first, threat modeling, and identity and access management. How can we integrate authorization and authentication? And my master thesis was about securing DevOps. How can we integrate security in CI/CD pipelines? And so Georgia and I decided to do a talk about DevSecOps. So what our talk is about? First, we will have a motivation why this topic is so important. Then we will show you the term DevSecOps. What is DevSecOps about? Then we have a slogan, stay calm and do DevSecOps. What does this mean? We will show you how you can integrate security in the DevOps context with the framework COMS. And we will sum up our talk and have some references for you at the end. And then the last point is the Q&A session. So why is this topic so important? The problem today is that we have one security expert per 100 developers. So the security knowledge is not so in the team present. And so a goal is that we increase the security awareness in the whole teams. On the one side, we deploy several times our software artifacts, and after a few, we do some penetration tests to check our security before going live. And on the other hand, we have the attackers that works the whole day. And because every company is a software company, it can happen that you would be attacked if you have no security in your software artifacts. And so the goal is to integrate security in as early as possible. And we will show you now how you can do this.
Yeah, thank you. Well, now after Christina talked about the motivation behind the concept of DevSecOps, I thought it's interesting to talk about the term just as a term and use that to give an introduction into the goals and the challenges and the agents that are associated. So first, what's in a name? I think it's no surprise to no one when I say, well, DevSecOps is a portmanteau of those three interjecting domains in IT. So the security domain, the operations domain, and the development domain. And I think it's, I like the term DevSecOps because it in itself integrates the goal that is associated. So when you read the term, you understand what the objective of it all is, and I like that because the term is also like its own mission statement. And a few more words about this term. Yeah, I already said it's a portmanteau, and it's also, I think, no surprise when I tell you that the term is proposed as an extension to the already established DevOps paradigm or DevOps term. And it's meant to highlight the needed inclusion of security concerns and security metrics and tasks. So in itself, it also offers an alternative because more modern approach and an improvement paradigm. And the goal of it all is to deal with current challenges that arise within security, software development, and operations. Like I said, the term is its own mission statement. And the term can be used to categorize a whole bunch of tools, practices, best practices, values, technologies that integrate and enable security into every step in a given software development lifecycle. And one of the explanations that I like and that I will use in this talk is DevSecOps sees itself as a solution approach for the so-called central chronic conflict within IT. Okay, that sounds dire, but that's actually a term from the literature, and I will explain now what the central chronic conflict within IT is and why it needs solving. And what the term means is just that there's this inherent conflict between two misaligned goals within the IT. On the one side, on this picture, you have the development and the test, let's say, domain or department. And they are motivated by change. They want a better user experience, better features, newer things, shinier, better, higher, whatever. So they are motivated by change and they are rewarded by change. And on the other side of this wall of confusion that stands between those two, is the other side of the coin, the operations domain that is motivated and rewarded for stability, because it's their job to keep systems secure and stable. But there's this inherent conflict between we want to change it all the time and to keep it stable all the time. And this is a conflict that can only be managed but never solved, because it's an ongoing inherent conflict. And this slide shows it for development on the one side and operations on the other side. And teams often describe that they feel like, okay, development just throws over code to them, that operations has to catch the code that was never developed for their particular environment, but they have to catch that code and make it run somehow. And on the next slide, I want to introduce the next domain, which would be the domain of security, and that brings its own challenges. So on this slide, we wanted to show, okay, we have this conflict, but it also has to be secure all the time. So the conflict expands, and now we have development and operations domain on the one hand that is striving for change and stability at the same time, and now it also has to be secure all the time. So now the conflict is perfect in a way. So with this in mind, it's no wonder that there is a I don't want to say cry for help, but a cry for change, to find a solution to deal with this conflict in the form of DevSecOps or another term. So in front of this conflict, I also wanted to highlight the non-existent definition or the non-existent manifesto of DevSecOps. So when someone asks, so what actually is DevSecOps? I can't point them to a certain definition or a certain manifesto and be like, just read that one and you will understand. No, it's not like that, because I will cite the citation now. DevOps and also DevSecOps is a movement of people committed to the development and operation of reliable, secure, and high-performance systems. And it has always intentionally refused to provide a definition or a manifesto. So if you tell me or us or anyone that you are asking, what exactly is the definition of DevSecOps? I can tell you, that's a tricky question. It's hard. There's no fixed definition. There's no fixed manifesto. But there are several ways how to understand and explain DevSecOps. And one of those ways would be to explain the term via its associated challenges. And that's exactly what I'm going to do. We used this slide to illustrate some common associated challenges, and I won't explain all of them. If you have a question about one of them in particular, or if you recognize one of those challenges as like your challenge that you have to deal with every day, just comment them down below, and then we can talk about it more in the Q&A session. But I want to highlight two of them, two challenges from this slide. And one would be the all too common security as a pitfall in the development process. So sadly, security as a domain and as a department is often seen as the pitfall, the bottleneck, we would say Spaßverderber, the guys who always have to block the thing. And that's sad, because that's actually not the purpose of security. And Christina will agree with me on that. And the other part, the other highlight that I wanted to make on this slide is that there's a general IT security experts lack. So on the one hand, we don't have enough qualified people, and in security, there's a whole new domain that we don't have enough qualified people in that. So that's also one of the challenges that is associated. And DevSecOps could be one way to distribute knowledge about security into the whole team, like Christina mentioned at the start, that there's not this disconnect between, okay, we have one security guy and 100 development guys. So that would be quite nice. And on this slide, I wanted to take the opposite approach and explain DevSecOps via its most commonly associated goals or objectives. And also on this slide, I just want to highlight 2 of them, even though we named a whole lot more. And of course, the classic associated goal would be incident prevention, that our systems are stable and secure. And if we stand our attack, if we are in the line of fire, that we have a better fighting chance than most. That would be the classic associated goal. And of course, things like faster time to market or a better response time or not drowning in technical debt, all those are worthy goals. And one last term from this slide that I would really like to explain is the ability of organizational ambidexterity. And that's a word I found during writing my bachelor thesis, and I quite liked it. Ambidexterity just means being able to use both hands simultaneously. And in this context, it just means that an organization or a project is able to use, on the one hand, the capability of exploitation. So whatever works, we will exploit it to make it work even better and better. And on the other side, with the other hand, you have the capability to explore. So explore new resources, new processes, new markets, and so on and so on. So that's just the ability of projects or organizations to use both hands, and that's why I like this this term so much. Okay, now we gave you a whole lot of things to Google later, but one thing that is like a classic way to explain DevSecOps is the CALMS acronym. And so we will also use that to give you like a whole list of ideas, what you could try to aim for an environment that is more DevSecOps aligned in a way. And the CALMS acronym, of course, are the 5 pillars on which one can build a DevSecOps organization or DevSecOps aligned project. And those 5 pillars stand for culture, automation, lean, measurement, and sharing. Measurement sometimes is named monitoring, but the acronym, of course, stays the same. And we will use this acronym to make the kind of unclear definition of DevSecOps a little bit more concrete. And I will also start with C for culture and give you some ideas regarding that topic. And culture includes the values, beliefs, and attitudes that surround and support a given business environment. So it's all the things that are never talked about but are essential, the cultural aspects. And we wanted to make it quite concrete in this talk. So we wanted to use this opportunity and talk about anti-pattern for designing DevSecOps teams, because we see that quite often, that a project is willing to do this DevSecOps thing. And then one of the first questions is, okay, but how would a team look like? How could we do that with the teams and the departments that we have? And we wanted to show what not to do so that you can understand what would be a more applicable solution. And of course, the famous anti-pattern would be there are the silos between DevSec and Ops. That's in some ways the status quo, sadly. Then the next anti-pattern would be the DevSecOps team silos. So we, as an organization, introduce DevSecOps team and give them none of the responsibilities and none of the budget and none of the deciding might. And then we created, instead of 3 silos, we created 4. Nice. That's an anti-pattern you should look for. And the last anti-pattern on this slide would be DevOps does not need sec. So we also introduce additional department or team that should enable DevSecOps-Associated change. But it's also grouped with Dev and Ops domain, and the original Sec department also stands as a new silo. So we don't actually change the bottleneck. We just named the bottleneck a little bit differently, and in essence, the situation stays the same. So those are famously the DevSecOps team anti-pattern that can be spotted quite regularly. And I hope you already understood what the point of that slide was. The point was that communication between the departments is key. So if you really want to do DevSecOps, it should be DevOps, because the Sec part is silent, because it should be so inherent in everything that you do. And you don't actually have to talk about DevSecOps because you're already doing it, and DevOps and DevSecOps means the same thing in your organization. That would be the goal. And one thing that we in our daily work found that was very helpful to create and enable this mindset of, like, I would say, seamless security concern or seamless security awareness would be the so-called attacker mindset. We have found that teaching an attacker mindset to those who don't seek to harm us but to protect us will greatly impact our success in information security. And what we mean by that is, if we teach people how to attack their own systems, they will think more about how to protect their own. And we also like give it a gaming aspect. So we teach them, yeah, you can have fun with that, with hacking, but afterwards you should really look into protecting your own thing. But that's one of the biggest wins that we had in consulting and teaching DevSecOps, is the so-called attacker mindset. So on this last slide about culture, before I give over to Christina, we wanted to collect a whole bunch of impulses to give to you as ideas. So if someone asks you, okay, how could we enhance our culture to be more in the spirit of DevSecOps, you could answer everything that's on this list. And that would be, first, create a psychologically safe environment. So the concept of psychological safety is referenced here. And create a space for continuous improvement, but I will talk about that more later. Find and communicate a shared vision and align goals between those different domains. And most importantly of all, open communication channels. Plan and protect blameless pre and post-mortems. So a post-mortem and a pre-mortem would be, we as the responsible people find ourselves in a common space and talk about, okay, something went wrong, what did we learn? Or something could go wrong, what could we learn now to prevent the thing that could go wrong? Also call back to the attacker mindset. And plan those meetings and protect those meetings to be a reoccurring thing. Then the freedom to fail or learn from failure approach is quite helpful to establish this culture. Kudos cards, where you give appreciation to your colleagues when they did something great or when they were helpful. That can be a great way to enhance culture. And the last 2 points would be a reminder that everyone must take responsibility for security. So it's not the responsibility of that one job title or that one department. It should be everyone's job, just like DevOps should be everyone's job. And the last thing, you as a project, maybe someone who's responsible for the project, you have to value security. So, because if you don't value security and invest in training and invest in the awareness in security, then there won't be a culture that also values security. So after this after this whole list of ideas, I will give over to Christina because she will talk about the next point in the CALMS acronym.
So the next point is automation. So we want to automate everything which is suitable and effectively automated. So we have to look on each process if it is really necessary to automate this process. And the heart of DevSecOps is a CI/CD pipeline, and CI stands for continuous integration. So we automate our build process, and CD stands for continuous delivery or continuous deployment. And the differences are the deployment to production automatically, or the last step that you click on a button and deploy to production. So, and here you see a CI/CD pipeline in the picture. So every step we can automate. For example, the build process can be automated, tests can be automated, the deployment can be automated, and therefore we have several tools. And we can also integrate security in the CI/CD pipeline. So in every step of the CI/CD pipeline, you can integrate a security tool. For example, in the build and test process, you can integrate static analysis tools like spot bugs or find bugs, so which analyze your code for security vulnerabilities or code smells, duplicates, for example. And you can also integrate some dependency check. So these tools check your used third-party libraries for vulnerabilities. And so you can patch your libraries if they have critical vulnerabilities in it. And there are a few more tools, for example, to scan images or to do some API checks with OWASP. And these are the dynamic security scans. And lots of our customers ask which tools there are to automate my processes. And here is one example list of DevOps tools and also security tools which you can use. But each company must decide which tool is suitable for them. And on the next slides, we have also some static analysis tools which you can integrate to check your code for code smells or vulnerabilities. And on the next slide, we have some dynamic analysis tools for security, which you can use to check, for example, your APIs or do some penetration tests with, for example, the burps, with the burp suite. And to sum up the chapter, automate everything which is suitable for you. So start with the infrastructure. So to automate the infrastructure, this can you do with infrastructure as code. You can automate your build process, delivery, and deployment, like deployment as a service, so automated deployment. Also to do test automation to check your quality of the software artifact, and also integrate security in your automation. So yeah, as I said before, in every step you can integrate security checks, and so you do security first because you check security as early as possible in your software artifact. Now we come to the third one.
Yeah, now it's my turn to talk about the L in comms, and that would be lean. And lean as a methodology is regarded to or focuses on reducing excess limitations, team sizes, and or the number of tools to that exact minimum, which will still deliver the desired results. So in a weird way, we just try to trim the fat of a process or a tool or an org chart until we are at that minimum, which will still do the thing we need it to do. And I like the idea in Lean to focus on what can you reduce as a way to improve. So it's not always we improve the thing that are currently working well, but it can also be we stop doing unnecessary things, and that's also a way to improve. So Christina and I talked about what is the waste, what is the fat that could be trimmed off. And there's one resource about that we both find really insightful, and that would be the 8 types of waste in software development. There's also the 8 types of waste in manufacturing, but of course we are more concerned with software development right now. And you can sum up those types of wastes with the downtime acronym, but I will talk about that a little bit more later. The idea is we have these 8 types of waste, and I will talk shortly about them, but I will set them into the context of security. So on this slide, you see the general types of waste like relearning, context switching, defects, and so on. And on the next slide, I will set them, like I said, into the context of security, so you can understand what things to avoid to have a process or an environment that is more DevSecOps aligned. So I will start with, I think, the one that is quite the easiest to understand, defects. Defects are a type of waste because, well, you can't use it, but you spend time and money and resource on it. So missing security controls, missing security budget, and all in makes it more likely to encounter defects. So we should have that in focus and try to avoid defects in that way as much as possible. Then unneeded features. And in a security context, that could be things like the wrong or unneeded patch strategy, restrictive security measures, and so on. So, for example, types of processes with regards to security that are established but actually never used. That would be one type of, well, waste. Work delays, also quite easy to understand. Whenever you are waiting for more information or more requirements, or a certain actor has to engage, or something has to be approved and you have to work for that. And that delay is also waste. And sadly, often like approvals in security are a type of waste because they are unnecessary long, not because the approval process is a waste, no, but because it's unnecessarily long, and that's the waste that we should focus on. So the next on this slide is also, I think quite easy to understand, but sadly very often spotted, would be not utilizing talent. And with regards to security context, sadly, there can often be observed a lack of training resources with regards to security, or a lack of awareness for its importance. So maybe there's a slashed budget for security training or something like that. And the other part would be biased staffing. And what we mean with that is that when there opens up a position for a security expert, that you as a hiring manager or something only focus on security experts, but you make it harder to fill that position with Quereinsteiger, so people that just recently joined that domain, or developers that would really like to learn more about security but never did explicitly something in that domain before. And in biased staffing, you just don't give them the possibility to well, conquer that domain. And so you limit yourself and you're not utilizing that talent. And that's also a type of waste. So, and we also want to have a look at the next 4 types of waste. So we also set the next types into the context of security, and the next type of waste would be unnecessary handoffs. And that could mean security integration happened too late. It happened just before the go live. So you could say, oh, we had one handoff to security and that failed. So one is too much. That's, of course, not the lesson you should take from this. You just should re-examine the types and the frequency of handoffs that happen in your process, and ask yourself if they are still that minimum that still provides you with the desired result. Then the next type of waste would be incomplete work. And incomplete work could be something like undocumented measures. So you spend time on those measures, but because no one else understands them, they are never used. And so they are, in fact, a type of waste. Technical debt, of course, when you did something shoddily just to quickly fix it, but then never come around to do it correctly, it's also incomplete work. And the last 2, I think, are the most human types of waste on this slide. There would be context switching and relearning. And I think context switching speaks for itself. And in a security project or a security context, that could mean that there's a lot of turnover with regards to security experts, or there are too many tools and you have to switch the tools constantly and lose time with that. And also firefighting. If you're one security person, always has to do the firefighting the whole day, and so constantly has to switch, that's also a type of waste, because you just don't really enable that person to do a good job. And relearning, of course, would be if you try to protect the same thing, the same vulnerability, or the same system, like double and triple. And so you have multiple layers, you have to learn those multiple layers. And so you have to relearn that. That's one type of relearning, context switching, and a type of waste. And the thing that I personally find very frustrating would be the unclear scope. So if the scope of a security measures constantly changes and you have to relearn what the new scope is, it's also a type of waste. It could be avoided with clear documentation or clear scope management. So that would be all the things we wanted to tell you about the 8 types of waste in the security context. And on this slide, like before, we just want to provide you with a whole list of ideas, what you could do to apply lean concepts in your day-to-day work. And one measure, one impulse would be plan and protect spaces to regularly question the status quo. That goes hand in hand with the psychological safety that we talked before about. But yeah, never think that the current status quo is the only way that it has to be and can never change. But when you are in IT, I think you're quite adept at change. Then use the downtime or the Tim Wood rule to reduce processes waste, like I talked about, overhead in processes, redundant approvals, for example, or unread documentation, and so on, and be critical there. Then one adage that is frequently used in this context is 20% of work should be used to improve work. So like 1 day a week or 1 week a month should be spent with improvement. For example, make the thing that you were planning to do better, really better now, and don't push it up to next year or when you leave the project or whatever. Then prioritize security, especially at the beginning of any software development lifecycle. So really prioritize security and deprioritize the waste. And of course, invest effort in the most critical and the most proximately vulnerabilities first. So the thing that's most likely to happen, you should first protect against. And one last adage regarding security tools: use as many as you need, of course, but as few as possible. So you can avoid excessive context switching. So now I can give back the control of the slides to Christina again, because she will talk about measurement and monitoring now.
Measurement and monitoring is about to collect all data to see the status of our system, of our artifacts, how secure is it, and so on. So for measurement, we can use KPIs, key performance indicators, which can support us. What are KPIs which we can use? For example, the delivery time, customer satisfaction, or the cost per release. So there are a lot of KPIs, but you may ask now, which should I use? And there are the 4 key metrics according to Forsgren, and they did a study, and this study shows that these 4 key metrics have a positive influence of our performance. So if these values are good of these 4 key metrics, then you have a good performance. The first metric is the time to restore your service. So if you have an incident, then this is the time to recover your system to production. So if this time is high, then your performance is very low. Then the second metrics is the change failure rate. So the percentage, how often deployments have a failure in production, an error. So this rate should be reduced. Then we have the third metrics, the lead time for change. So the time we need from the commit until he is going live in production. And the fourth metrics is the deployment frequency. How often can we deploy to production? We have customers who do this every day, but we have also some customers which can do this, for example, every 3 months to deploy to production. So these are the 4 key metrics. And what can we additional measure according to security? We can measure the costs of violation. So when we have an incident, for example, which costs do our company have, then we can measure the costs to avoid these incidents, violations. And we can also measure the pen test effort. So there are studies that when we integrate security as early as possible, then we can reduce the pen test effort before going live. And what you can measure also is the vulnerability findings. So if you integrate the security tools, then these tools should not report so much vulnerabilities with which are critical. And also if you have a lots of open requirements which belongs to security in the backlog before going live, this is also not good. So this amount should be less when you go live. And the last one is, so if you automate the security checks in your CI/CD pipeline, then you may have some security builds, and these builds should not fail often. So a KPI would be that the reduction of security failed builds. And what you should also do is to monitor your application. So do it the whole day, the monitoring, and then you can see what happens in your system. For example, with logging tools like Splunk or Kibana. And we have there are additional tools for incident management, for example, Opsgenie. With this tool, you can coordinate your incident. What are the impulses for measurement and monitoring? You should measure everything what you can measure, so that you can see how efficient you are and what is your performance about, and establish monitoring and logging so that you see as early as possible, for example, if an attack happens. And with logging, you can see what your system does and what, for example, a user does in your system. And if you have dashboards, then you can, for example, show your customers or your stakeholders how successful as well as the failures happens. And then you have graphics to show them. And there are the 4 key metrics of Forsgren, which you can use. They are very easy to implement. And in addition, there are also the measurements for security with the KPIs I showed you before. And you have to reduce vanity metrics, so metrics no one need. And also you have to address the measurement to the right person. So, and not only show successful measurements, so, and you have also to show them the failure bills, for example. And what we can say is that when we focus on security, then we can reduce some costs, for example, for pen testing or so. And the last one of this COMS acronym will be presented by Georgia.
Yeah, thank you. The last pillar of comms is, of course, sharing. Sometimes you see just calm and they just leave out the sharing, which we both think is a mistake, because sharing is a vital part and the basis of so much other improvements that should happen. And sharing includes the need and really the focus and the necessity for ongoing communication between all the agents. So between development, operations, security, and each other agent in the value chain that may be involved, in the future may be involved. And sharing also highlights the need to share not only results and data and like the basic bones metrics, but also analysis, learnings, lessons learned, and of course, ideas. So I once read an article that had the headline, "Continuous improvement is the true Northstar of DevOps." And I really like that headline, and I really like that metaphor of a Northstar that should guide all other all other measurements. Yeah, measures. Sorry, measures. There should really be the guiding light. And continuous improvement as an idea is, in a way, just the old adage, get better every day. So really focus on, okay, what are we doing today? What could we do better? And implement small enough steps to get there. And that, of course, along the line of the whole software development lifecycle. So really make sure that it's a loop, that, for example, learnings and analyses and ideas that are generated in production with the customer, that those really circle back into the planning stage or the planning phase, so that you really have this loop of continuously thinking about, okay, what do we do and what can we do better and how can we avoid stupid mistakes and so on and so on. And just make this a daily habit if you can, and strive for that. And of course, you all know that the unofficial logo of DevSecOps and DevOps is the infinity symbol, as you can see here. And of course, that's as a matter of fact, so because of course you're never done with DevSecOps. And that's why it's an infinite loop that should actually never come to a point and be like, okay, we are done. We are finished. It's ready. We can't improve anymore, because that's not how software works. That's not how DevOps work. And certainly that's not the goal of continuous improvement. And I think we already highlighted it, but I wanted to make this point once more. Security is not a circle. No, security is not one single step in this continuous pipeline that you see before you. That's not one step after, I don't know, a plan that says security phase now, because security should be woven in and injected into every process and every tool that you use. And that's why we continuously try to emphasize the importance of the continuous improvement. And that is the part of sharing that I, in this slide, wanted to really make clear and highlight. And the other part after this introduction to the importance of sharing and the importance of improvement, I wanted to give you something more concrete, like what can you really do to inject this DevOps and DevSecOps continuous loop with security concerns and security metrics. And that would be, how could, for example, the Scrum process could be used to really focus and make sure that security is a concern, and as a concern is present. And of course, I think I don't have to explain Scrum in great details, but you all know that it's made up of artifacts and rituals. And one important artifact that I wanted to highlight in this idea that I'm going to present you is the safe increment, so that the increment is not only the next step in our development artifact, but really the safe part of it is in some way agreed upon, documented. The product backlog and the sprint backlog are in some way interjected with security concerns in a way, and that can be achieved. And what we, Christina and I, propose to clients that we consult would be one more role or one more actor in this whole process, and that one more actor or role would be the security officer, sometimes also called the security champion or the security ninja. I mean, you can call it whatever you like, but the purpose of that role would be to be that North Star or that guiding force regarding security in the day-to-day Scrum process. And for example, aid the product owner in filling the product backlog with security concerns and really hash it out and explain them and have a back and forth about, okay, what should we focus on in that and that and that step. And the security officer should also keep security concerns present in the daily Scrum, for example, as a ritual, or as a retrospective or review ritual should be this constant reminder: security is present and security has a say and is allowed to criticize and give ideas and be transparent, and step by step educate the whole team about what they can do to be a part of DevSecOps concerns. Because as we told you before, security should be everyone's responsibility and everyone's job. So that's the thing that we advise, to introduce this new role. But also we want to caution you, and don't think that DevSecOps could be siloed into one more role that you could hire, because that's not the idea we wanted to give you. It's just a suggestion. And we have a lot of other suggestions, like before on this last slide for sharing. We wanted to give you some ideas, some impulses, how to make the concept of sharing more tangible in your day-to-day work. And one impulse would be to promote consistent knowledge exchange and transfer between all possible stakeholders. And that could be achieved, for example, by hackathons or mentoring programs or job shadowing, job rotation programs, especially between people that openly tell you, hey, I don't have a background in security, but I really would like to dip my toe into it. Demos, of course, lecture series, lunch and learn sessions, and all those really wonderful and creative possibilities to transfer knowledge. And then, of course, establish and expand exchange rituals. Wow, that's a sentence. In everyday project work, for example, retrospectives or reflections on what did well. And one possibility would also be regularly have a retrospective about your onboarding process with regards to security, because I think in an onboarding process, there's a huge opportunity to explain, okay, this is why we do things in this and this and this way. And because you have to explain it to someone new, you can also reflect on it, and you can also use that as an opportunity to be like, hey, but why do we do it like that? I mean, we could do it in a different way. And the last thing from this slide would be, of course, the training of T-shaped people and integrating security from the very beginning, e.g. with a security champion that I was illustrating before as this presence for security. And the last thing would be game days, so-called game days, that are focused on giving the team, the project, a certain problem that they should fix in like a day or 2 days, and that has a security focus. So, for example, patch that one vulnerability as a team on that day, and you all learn how to do it, and maybe do some team building in that. That would be nice. So that would be the last idea from that slide. Someone in the chat mentioned that capture the flag events are a fun way. So yeah. Catch the flag, in my opinion, is a good and fun way to educate developers. I'm pretty sure not only developers, but yeah, that sounds nice. And then with this said, I would get to the next slide and talking about the conclusions for today, because we reach our time limit, and also wanted to highlight a few last references so you can, like I said, know what to Google. And the conclusion for today, in summary, would be DevSecOps can be understood, should be understood as a set of philosophies, paradigms, practices, and tools that help a given organization to deliver better products faster and, of course, more securely. That's the whole point of DevSecOps. And DevSecOps aims to better manage the often overlooked balancing act. And with balancing act, I mean the thing that we in the introduction used to explain the misalignment of goals. So this balancing act between the goals of security, development, and operation agents in IT. And like I said before, it aims to better manage, not to solve, because it's an inherent conflict that can't be solved. It can only be managed on a day-to-day basis. And security concerns, metrics, and tasks, of course, like we highlighted over and over again, have to be integrated into the software development lifecycle really from the start to make this balance manageable from the start. And one last thing, despite the high popularity of DevSecOps or DevOps, there's no fixed definition, so don't feel bad if you don't have a definition memorized that you can tell someone when they ask you, so you saw the talk, so what is DevSecOps? Actually, tell me. So don't feel bad about that. We also provided a small overview on this slide to just give you something to take home, to have it clear, concise on one slide. What is DevSecOps? What is DevSecOps not? Those are some mistakes we see in consulting, people that think they know exactly what DevSecOps is, but sadly, they sometimes display like a limited view of DevSecOps when they suggest that it's like an additional department that can be implemented, or additional role that could be hired, or a job title or something like that, or that DevSecOps is just that one auditing or criteria catalog and you just have to check all the checkboxes and then voila, you do DevSecOps. Or that it's that one seal of approval or that single tool suite that should be established once and then it runs and then you don't have to change it ever again or touch it ever again. And last point, in a good way and in a bad way, DevSecOps is not one theory-laden regulatory framework. So you continually have to think about, okay, what is our current challenge? What can we achieve with that? What are our circumstances? And that exactly is what DevSecOps is. It's a current ongoing paradigm shift, and it's a current ongoing reaction to the sadly often negatively experienced status quo in IT, with all that conflict and all that, oh, we don't speak the same language, or we have misalignment of goals, there's this wall of confusion between us, we have too few people that want to do security, and so on and so on. DevSecOps also is a great way to have that term for a collection of concepts and values and so on that work, but also to criticize what didn't work. And that's the last point I wanted to illustrate, would be that DevSecOps also stands for a huge community that constantly investigates new ideas, that evaluates practices, good practices, bad practices, and that propagates technologies and values that have proven to work. And that is a huge asset in this context, because you constantly want to find new ideas and new solutions. So with all that said, wow, I think that was it from me. No, one last slide, I'm sorry. Just wanted to highlight a few books that I think are great ways to get more familiar with more concrete concepts of DevOps and DevSecOps. And so I highlighted them here, but I won't spend a lot of time talking about them, because the more important thing is the next slide, and the next slide would be Christina with her references. So I will just hand over, but those are the books.
Yeah, I have also some references for you, which belongs to security. If you want to do application security or API security, then there are some references. Also learn something about ransomware attacks or identity and access management, or how to building secure and reliable systems. Here are some references. And now we are at the end of our talk. Thank you for your attention. And if you have questions, please ask them now.
Yeah, thank you very much for this great deep dive. We had a few comments from viewers Amit and KG, and some of the comments I already showed during the talk. I think we have maybe time for one question, but this question came up, I think, before you showed the KPI slides. So let's see if it's already covered or not. To implement DevSecOps, it requires management buy-in. What's the challenge with companies you consult? Are they going from nothing to DevOps or straight to DevSecOps? How to persuade management? What metrics or report to provide? So,
of course you could use, that sounds disparaging, but you could use the fear tactic and be like, okay, if we have incidents, if we don't invest in security, that could be the cost, or that could be the reputation destruction, or that could be the negative fallout. So yeah, you could use the numbers, the precedents of security failures to establish that this is a thing of concern and that every company should be concerned with security. And one more positive way to persuade management or get management buy-in would be, hey, we could improve our processes because we could avoid this type of waste in this way, or we could focus more on this more important thing in that and that and that way. And because of that, we could spend more time on the truly important stuff or the revenue driven stuff or whatever. So the negative way would be the fear tactic with this could cost us a lot if we don't invest. And the positive way would be, hey, we have so much more potential. If we would stop wasting time and budget and money on this and that, we could do so much more. We could improve so much more. And yeah, we showed the metrics. I mean, I can go back to that one. That slide, we showed the security metrics most and for all. So yeah, things like the cost of violation, like I said, that would be the negative tactic, or focus on improving the change failure rate would be the more positive way to show, hey, if we have a perfect change failure rate, then we could avoid so much unnecessary time and effort. Christina, I'm pretty sure you have also something to say.
But in addition, we can say that, most of the customers do DevOps, but now they are integrating security because of the new regulations. For example, in Germany, for the data how is it called? I don't know the English words. DSGVO.
GDPR.
GDPR. Thanks. And therefore they have to do security, and yes, therefore they are now integrating security.
Yeah, and of course, the ITIL, so the IT infrastructure library would be one way to inform oneself about what metrics to use, what roles to implement, something like that. Yeah,
All right.
the ITIL version 4. Yeah.
Yes. One more question, maybe from Björn. I think it's interesting that we have test within the DevOps cycle, but not security. Do you think that should be the ultimate goal, to integrate it directly into the flow?
Yeah, it's hard to integrate it on one part in this DevOps cycle. We tried it with a whole sec over the DevOps picture, but you have to integrate security on every step. So it's difficult to put in on one. Georgia, what's this your opinion?
But well, that would be a worthy goal, to just to integrate security so seamlessly that you don't have to think about it, because it's just the basis of every other step. That would be so nice. That would be like it's so easy for you to treat every person the same. You don't have to think about it. That would be the ideal. But yeah. Well, one can dream. Yeah.
Thank you. I think we are over time a bit, so I think let's conclude the session here. Thanks everyone for the questions. Also, huge thanks to Christina and Georgia. If you have questions afterwards, of course, you can drop them in our Discord channel. And before I close, I want to just announce that we already have the next talks lined up for the coming months. So in August, we have Terraform practices, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And then in September, we have the tale of avoiding a time-based DDoS attack in Node.js. That's it for today. Thank you again, Christina and Georgia. And that's it from my side. We have been DevSecOn, an inclusive community that educates and enables developers in application security. Thank you, everyone, and bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye. See you in Discord.